Minecraft. Well, we're back to where we were before, but more about that in a sec. I've got to set up the usual nonsense, or it feels like nonsense, but just put some stuff in the description because I want to make sure that people can see what it is that we're going to try and build today. So I'll just drop a link into the description if I can. It's been a bit slow here. So I'm going to put a link in the description to the website that I'm using, or at least where I found the blueprints for Anne Frank's secret annex and what the building itself looked like, because this is what we're going to try and build today. So it would be useful, I would think, for people to be able to see what it looks like, because then as we're building it, people can kind of get a gauge of what's working and what isn't, and so on and so forth, and give me advice, because if anybody saw the last stream, they'll know I haven't got a clue how to play, really. I haven't really got much sense about me, although I've been doing a bit of practice. So I'm going to put it into the description there, and I'm going to put it into the comments as well, if I can. Hello everyone. Hello Ben, especially to Ben. So, right, pin this. I don't know what it looked like. Well, don't worry, Ben, because as soon as the thing that's blocking off the comment, and yeah, well, exactly. That's the idea. We want people to know what it looked like. And also, very excitingly, I've set up an Instagram account now, guys. I'm on Insta. I want to be Insta famous, so I'm going to put a link to my Instagram account in the description too. Whoa, let's connect these things up, and then we can actually get building, and it won't just be me looking. I mean, if you look now, I don't know who someone's flagged this up to me before. Incredible, really, that I have a drifty controller. So someone had said that my controller's drifty. Now I thought this was a compliment. I'm not so sure anymore that it is. But if you look at the screen, it's kind of just slowly drifting to the right. That's what it means, I think. That's what a drifty controller is. So I'm claiming that this is why I've never been very good at COD, because my controller has just been let me down. So here we go. We're just going to show where we're up to at the moment. This here is going to be the front of the street that we are looking at. So if you've seen the link that I've dropped, I mean, I think it's in the comments. I'm just checking. Yeah, it's there, right. So if you've seen the link, you'll see that this building right here, this one that I'm kind of going up and down in front of, this is the building that the secret annex was in, right? So this is like the facade or the front of the street. And what we're going to do is we're going to start trying to build the front section. So if you've seen the blueprints that I've put up, thank you very much. Yeah, we're slowly making progress. If you've seen the link, you'll see that there's a front section and then there's a back section, which is the secret annex. So it's going to come right the way back. Now, eagle-eyed viewers will have noticed that this is a different world to the one we initially started in when I played with Mr. Tim. Now, Mr. Tim is busy today. I think he's getting his suit fitted for next year's Met Gala, so he can't join us, sadly. But we'd made some progress and we'd started building, but then I had to restart for a number of reasons. And this is where we're up to. So the plan today is just to make a start on the front section. Eventually we might have to move some of this back. It's not going to be to scale, obviously, but we're going to start building some stuff, and we'll start thinking about Germany after the First World War, and I think I'm going to start it here. I'm going to go with this one because this looks like the colour of the walls. If you look at pictures of inside the annex, at least, it's kind of like this colour, so we'll try and make it as realistic as we can, and we'll go from there. So I don't know how far I'm going to come, but yeah, so I'll keep an eye on the comments. If we Met Gala, Mr. Tim's not going to the Met Gala. It's like this fancy bash. I don't even know what it celebrates. Someone probably does. I've probably heard about it before. I'm not sure. But I'll keep an eye on the comments as we go, as always. And if there's any questions or any recommendations, especially on how to build stuff on Minecraft, that would be great. And we'll probably go for about half hour, 40 minutes or so. We'll see how far we get. And we'll go from there. Now, what we'll be talking about as I'm building this, eventually I'll get into a rhythm. Let's see, this is going to be awful. I need Mr. Tim big time. There we go. Once we get into a rhythm, we're going to be thinking about the rise of the Nazis. Now, the content, the actual stuff we're going to talk about. Hello. The content that we're going to talk about is is based on Edexcel's GCSE Weimar Nazi Germany topic, okay? And the whole point of these, well, part of the point of these videos is that for those who are revising for GCSE exams, they'll be able to access some of the information in a way that's a bit different to usual. So last time we thought about Germany straight after the First World War. So Germany had been blockaded by the Allies, they couldn't get resources in, and they were basically, the German people were starving, or at least they didn't have enough food to survive. So the Kaiser, the German leader, abdicated, he resigned, a new system of government called the Weimar Republic was put into place, and they immediately signed an armistice, a ceasefire, which ended the first, well, stopped the fighting formally in the First World War. Officially it stopped the fight, people from actually shooting each other, on the 11th of November, but it left Germany in all sorts of uncertainty. What we build in Anne Frank's house, yes, absolutely, thank you, yeah. What we're building is, we're going to be building the house that Anne Frank and her family, and others, hid in during the Second World War, and we're going to try and tell the story of how she got there, or at least why it was necessary for people to hide from the Nazis, by looking at how they came to power, and what they did when they were in power. So, end of the First World War, Germany's in a dire position. The new system of government that comes in is hated by the German people almost immediately. And they're actually called, a number of them called the November Criminals, for signing the ceasefire that signalled the end of the fighting between Germany and the Allied nations. So we're going to go straight up to here. We're going to go up as far as we can. We're going to build the wall as high as we can, and then we'll start filling in some of the details from there. So that'll do as an introduction. Someone's been there, seen the hidden room. That's very cool, to be fair. Yeah, I've not been yet. It looks like it's super busy. You've got to book well in advance, but that's very cool if someone's actually been. So you could give us some proper advice then about what things actually look like by the time we get there. That'll be good. So, First World War ends, or the fighting ends 11th of November 1918. The next big thing that the Weimar Republic, the Weimar government have to organise and find out is how they're going to officially end the fight. So they're going to need to sign a peace treaty. Now, at first, the Germans believe that they're going to be invited to the conference that is going to decide their fate, as it were, or decide what the eventual peace treaty will be. But in the end, they're not, and they're forced to sign something called the Treaty of Versailles, because it's drafted and signed in the Palace of Versailles, just outside of Paris in France. I'm going to start building a little outline of this building here, so I know roughly where I am. Fill in the gaps. This is as we go. So, hello, Ahmad. So, let me think. Let's just get, if we go across here, and then I'll know. I'll have something to work on. Then, oh, get out of the way, mate. Sorry. Yes, there we go. So they signed the Treaty of Versailles. It doesn't go down well, and we're going to look at why it doesn't go down well in a moment. And it's mainly because for the German people, they feel that they've really been hard done by, and they've been forced to sign and agree to something that is devastating for them. And I'll just go up to, there we go, that'll do, won't it? That'll do. And I'll know just where the roof will eventually be. I think that's a good idea. Probably isn't. Who knows? It's quite clear. I haven't got a clue what I'm talking about. Doctor Who went to Versailles, didn't he? I think he did. I'm sure he did. Now, it's interesting. I'll come on to this in a sec, but there's a really cool link between... there we go. Between the Palace of Versailles and Germany anyway. So we'll look at the terms of the treaty, and I'll explain that in a moment. So, the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, usually we use, I think it's an acronym. I'm going to go with an acronym to help remember what the terms are, and it's LAM, which stands for Land, Army, Money, Blame. So basically, their land, a large amount of land is taken from them. They lose, I think it's about 13% of their territory. And I'm going to start building the first floor. So if you look at the blueprints I've put in, you'll see that there's like a first floor. There's like 4 floors for the building that we're going to look at today. I think about there is about right. I'm going to go with it. Let's go with that. Just check that that's all in order. Right, that's good. So I think it's about 13% of the land they lose. They lose all their colonies. They lose a large chunk of land in the. Let me get this the right way around because I'm dreadful at geography, obviously. The east of Germany is given to Poland. It's called the Polish Corridor, which gives the Polish nation access to the sea. And the German people are livid with what they've lost in terms of land. Their army is reduced to the size of 100,000 men. So, oh, this isn't good. I'm glitching, or I'm freezing. It's one of the. Absolutely, that's a very good point, Miles. Yes, they also do lose resource-dense territory and the national pride that's attached to it. You're absolutely right, Miles, and that will be coming back up because they aren't. The German nation's pride is definitely hurt by the Treaty of Versailles. So their army is reduced to the size of 100,000 men, so they're not allowed to have a big army, which makes them feel very insecure because they won't be able to defend themselves, really, if anyone was to threaten them going forward. They have to pay money to the Allied nations. Works out, I think it's about 6. I never get the billion, whether it's 600 billion or 6.6 billion, because I feel like there might have been change in between in terms of how we often refer to billions. I'm probably wrong there, but they have to pay at least billions to the Allies, and they've only actually recently, I think in like 2010, officially, formally kind of ended their payments there, finished paying that off, the German nation. Although there are a number of negotiations, and that's kind of looked at in a number of ways, and that'll come up eventually when we look at the 1920s. So they've lost their land, they lose their army, they have to pay money. But the one that really upsets the German people is, and it comes back to the idea of pride, is called is blame. B. It's called the War Guilt Clause. Clause 231 of the Treaty of Versailles says that the German nation have to take responsibility for starting the First World War, which, in fairness, is a little harsh. Yes, there we go. 13% of their territory. Yeah, it's a little harsh saying that they. I mean, it's kind of the First World War is almost sadly a textbook case of lots of different people with the opportunity to change things and stop something bad from happening, not taking the opportunity to do so. So it feels a little bit, it's one of those things. Some people do blame Germany for the stance they took in the crisis before the First World War breaking out. Thought they were quite aggressive and that kind of pushed the world towards war. Maybe, I mean, probably, but there are a number of other things in there. The Second World War, it's worth saying, it's very hard to argue against the fact that the Nazis, were responsible for the Second World War starting in the way that it did. That's a pretty non-controversial or uncontroversial statement, whichever the correct phrase is. So it's a serious problem for the new system of government, the Weimar Republic, because they've signed the armistice, they've stopped the fighting when German people seemingly thought they were going to win the war, and now they're forced to sign a treaty that they disagree with. Historians to this day bicker about whether this treaty was as harsh as people make out. There are really good arguments on both sides. I've not really got time to go into it majorly today, but the general sense is that the Treaty of Versailles lays the foundation for the Second World War, because the Nazis and lots of people within Germany, not just the Nazis, are going to use the Treaty of Versailles as something of a roadmap to try and correct Germany's situation. They feel that they've been really hard done by, and their plan is to kind of correct this going forward. They're going to try and take back the land that was taken from them. They're going to try and build up their army. They don't want to pay reparations, the money that they're forced to pay. Right, I'm going to have a look at this from the side. So if you've got... let's have a look. So, sounds like a massive army now. Warfare has changed. That's a very good point, Miles. And it's worth saying the 100,000 men for the army, that is the entire armed forces. That includes kind of the administration of the army. It's not just 100,000 fighting men. So it's not. It was a real problem for the German nation and how they saw themselves on the global stage. Right, I'm just having a look. So I'm going to have a look at the blueprints that I'm basing this on. And we've got a bit of a door, so we've got like a wall, probably. I'm going to say the wall's about here now. I don't know what the right brick is or whatever to use because it's all in grey. I don't want it to be the same as the one below, so should we put it here? I'm going to make this a wall. And then let's see. Oh. Well, we won't see that, will we? I'm not really doing that. That would be silly, wouldn't it? So we're going to put a wall there, and then there's a door just behind it, and then we've got another wall towards the end. So, I mean, it's worth saying, one of the reasons I'm doing this before we move on from the Treaty of Versailles, a kid actually asked me, like randomly the other day, how Anne Frank hadn't been found, or how the Frank family had hidden, or how they remained hidden for so long. I think part of it is because of how the Annex looked. I think part of it is because of the actual construction of the building. It was really hard to tell, and hopefully when we finish the street this will be obvious. It was really hard to tell that there was an extra building at the end of the building that we're building at the moment. Right, let's see. Yeah, Treaty of Versailles was really difficult for the Weimar Republic. They really struggled with it. They'd already had a lot of hate, and now they've signed something that they themselves, didn't want to sign, but kind of, well, if they hadn't have signed it, the possibility of war breaking back out was quite real, and Germany weren't in a position to fight, so they're forced to sign it. It doesn't go down well, and then they're stuck, really, with a treaty and having to follow the terms of the treaty when they themselves would have rather have done the complete opposite. So how do I place a door then, guys? Right, there we go. Now that's looking pretty proper. That's looking like the bottom floor so far. So I'm going to put the other wall here, and then we'll start going on to the next floor. So I'll have a quick look in the comments, and then we'll move on if there's any questions. Nah, it doesn't look like it. Oh, good. I mean, it's good to have questions too, but it's good. So, I mentioned earlier that the Treaty of Versailles, one of the weird things was the signing of the treaty in the Palace of Versailles was a pretty cool thing, because as it happens, the Palace of Versailles, where the Treaty of Versailles signed, is also not purely coincidence, of course, but is also the place in which the German nation was officially formed. In 1871, I think, when Germany becomes Germany, when Otto von Bismarck brings the different German states together into one nation, that officially happens after the Prussians have defeated the French in a conflict in 1871. So in the exact same building that the German nation is officially formed, the treaty is signed that in many ways restricts the German nation dramatically through the Treaty of Versailles at the end of the First World War. So one of these weird places where a number of dramatic things happen all in one place. Right, I've got a comment from Miles. Can you see parallels with today, with economic hardship seeing a rise in blaming of minorities and scapegoating, i.e. with Frank's people in the 20s, 30s, Jimmy? Yeah, in some senses, absolutely. I mean, it's always a tricky thing, isn't it, to draw parallels wisely. I'm sure that there are a number, and what we'll do in the next video, because we're hoping to get up to the early 1920s today, we'll have another look at that, and we'll try and draw some parallels where it seems they're appropriate. Now, I'm on to the second floor here, so we're going to just whack a room. I think about here is about right. And then there's a gap for a door, I believe. So the Treaty of Versailles signed. It doesn't go down well, and the Weimar Republic are really struggling almost immediately with managing and staying in power in Germany. Just before the treaty is signed, actually, in January, I think, of 1919, there's a communist revolt, a revolution, where people called the Spartacists are trying to replicate what's happened in the Soviet Union, what's happened in Russia, where the Bolsheviks took over, the communists take over and get rid of the Tsar. They tried to replicate that in Germany. Now, these are what we call left-wing. It's a left-wing political group, which means they veer on the side of communism. Now, these are all like super big political ideas, and we'll definitely talk about them more going forward. But for today, it's enough just to say that there was a group of people who felt that workers should have more of a say in how the country was run. People who felt that workers and what we call the working class, or the proletariat, should be in charge of a country, and that those who have wealth and capital, resources, factory, land and money, that should be taken essentially from those who are in, say, economic power, who have the money, and it should be shared out. Now, this had happened in the Soviet Union in 1917 when Lenin took over, or Lenin and the Bolsheviks take over, and the Spartacists in Germany want to copy that in 1919. So not only have the Weimar Republic got to deal with being blamed for the ending of the First World War, they're also having to contend with a violent group of people trying to take over the country, and trying to do it in the exact same way. Trying to do it, just something funny just popped up on my phone just as I was trying to copy that. In the exact same way that happened in Russia. So it's a real problem. Now, they have some success. They managed to shut down a number of places in Berlin, and politicians flee Berlin. Weimar Republic politicians flee, and it looks like they might have some success. But the politicians turn to a group of ex-soldiers called the Freikorps, right-wingers, so people who strongly disagree with communists, people who had actually blamed communists in part for the ending of the First World War, and they ask them if they'll basically kill the communists for them. So it's a bit dirty, it's a bit mucky, and it does scream of mafia politics in a way, but basically they go to a group of people who hate the communists, and they say, look, You know those weapons that you shouldn't have, that in theory you should have turned in because your ex-soldiers and the army's size has been restricted? Would you use those to kill the communists, and then we can kind of stay in power? And the Freikorps, who don't like the Weimar Republic themselves, look at it and see it as an opportunity to kill communists, so they take it. And the Spartacists are essentially crushed. Their leaders, Karl Liebknecht and Rosa Luxemburg, are killed. A number of others are. And the Spartacist threat is essentially removed almost entirely at this stage. So even before the Treaty of Versailles signed, they've got a real problem with communists. And as we'll see in a moment, the Freikorps themselves, even though they're willing to help get rid of the communists, aren't particularly too keen on the Weimar Republic itself. So I'll leave it there for a little sec. We'll have a look at the if there are any questions or comments. Yeah, that's a really good comment. So the proletariat is the working class. Now these are obviously quite tricky terms in and of themselves. They are the opposite of the bourgeoisie, which is where the term bougie comes from, and we'll absolutely get there. I think we'll do a little video on Karl Marx soon, because there's a lot of this that, in terms of historical understanding of the 20th century, there's a lot that's missing if you don't get a good grasp of what Karl Marx was all about. He was one of the founding thinkers of communism. So let's have a look. How are we doing here? So we've got... I'm going to find a way to fill in these gaps, because that is doing my head in. Does anybody know? Does anybody know how to fill this in? If anyone can drop a comment or tell me a good way to fill in gaps, because I don't want to kind of go back through and fix it all, then that'll be wicked. Amazing. So no more questions. Brilliant. We'll just crack on. We should get this floor done. And how are we looking time-wise? We're on 20 minutes, so we'll probably have another 20 minutes or so here, and then we'll leave it and then cover the rest later. So what have we talked about? Right, the Spartacists. So the Spartacists try and take over. They fail because the Freikorps help the Weimar Republic out. But in 1920, a year after the Treaty of Versailles signed, the Freikorps themselves are involved in an attempt to get rid of the new system of government. So there's a guy called Wolfgang Kapp who leads something called the Kapp Putsch, and it's an armed attempt to get rid of the Weimar Republic. Now, the irony here is that this is pretty successful, seemingly at first. Berlin is basically taken by the Freikorps. The politicians flee. But in order to get rid of this threat, the Weimar Republic turned to the they turned to workers, and they asked them to go on strike. Now, a lot of the time, industrial workers in Germany at this time were actually communists, or were quite supportive of communism. So basically, what the Weimar Republic do is, after using the Freikorps to get rid of the Spartacists, they then try to use, they then use the workers who often supported communism to get rid of the Freikorps. So they ask them to go on strike. They do. The Freikorps and Wolfgang Kapp can't run the country whilst the strike is in place, and they eventually have to pack it in. And those Freikorps who remain or continue to try and push the button ultimately are arrested, and the whole thing collapses. So even though the Weimar Republic is staying in charge and they're looking quite good, in some senses, what's actually happening is they're staying in power sheerly by the fact that the other group of people, or at least, what's the best way of phrasing this? They basically stay in charge because there are people who hate other people more than the Weimar Republic. It's not because the Freikorps, for example, don't support the Weimar Republic because they like it, obviously. They do it because they hate the communists. And the workers don't support the Weimar Republic because they love them. They support them because they want to stop the Freikorps from running the country. What the Weimar Republic ultimately represents in Germany in the early 1920s is a group of people who most people hate, but the fact that they stay in place is just a reflection of the fact that many people within Germany hate other people more. It is not a particularly happy place to be. So, tinted glass has been suggested here. Let me have a look at some tinted glass then. So, I'll search this up. Now, I was accused last time of cheating on here because I'm using creative mode. Make that whatever you want, but is this tinted glass? Okay, right, let's whack that in there. Right, let's see. It's not placing in there, you know. I might have to drop a level later, which is going to be a big faff, but it's fine. It's fine. So we've got 2 floors done. I don't think I'm going to get a 3rd floor in there, am I? Oh, maybe I will. It's going to be tight. It's going to be tight. I'm going to have to lift the rest up. I'm sure we can get away with that at some stage. Right, let's just keep going for now, and then all the ironing out and making sure things work I can do later. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do this one a little bit lower. This one could go about there. Right, that looks fine. Eventually I'll use some photographs to try and make sure that what's in this side of the annex is fairly accurate. But for the actual annex itself, which is going to be at the back, it's going to be about here by the time we're done. We're going to use the diary itself, so we're going to use Anne Frank's diary to fill in the gaps. If you've not read Anne Frank's diary, I've mentioned this before, it's really worth reading because she writes really, really well for her age, and it's actually quite funny. It's a tragic story in lots of ways about what happens to the Frank family. Not just the Frank family, like to Jews generally living in Germany or in Nazi-occupied nations at this time, but it is a real tragedy reading her story, knowing kind of how it ends. So we will get there. So we'll fill this up, and then I think we'll touch on 2 more things revision-wise, and then we'll call this a day, I think. Although I did mention about cheating. I have found a wicked way of cheating in terms of clearing land. So you'll see all this here was once a big hill, and I've taken it all out. There's like a command you put in and it deletes a whole load of blocks. So that saved me hours, which was great. I think this is a bit white, isn't it? I'm going to need to put like a carpet or something on here eventually. But all in good time. So we're in terms of Weimar Republic, where are we? Oh yeah, so Germany's a pretty fragmented place. People are trying to get rid of the new system of government. It's not going too well. Now you could argue that some of this is actually not the new system of government's fault. It's not the politicians' fault that Germany's in the situation it is, and that people in Germany are so angry with each other. But the next problem we're going to talk about is in large part their fault, or at least they exacerbate it. They make it a much bigger problem than it originally was. So, in 1920, I think it's like December 1922, right at the end of the year, Germany default on a reparations payment. So you might remember, as we mentioned, when the Treaty of Versailles is signed, one of the things they have to do is pay money to the Allies. Now, in December of 22, I'm sure it's December, they don't pay what they're supposed to pay, and this is a real problem. And France, who had been really kind of rabid at the treaty, at the construction and the kind of debates about the treaty, really wanted to kind of hamper Germany. When they default on a payment in 22, they send in troops with Belgium into an area of Germany called the Ruhr, which is an industrial region where lots of things are being made, lots of different resources are being created. There's loads of factories there, and they think, right, we're going to go and we're going to take what we are owed. From the workers directly. If you're not going to kind of give it to us in money, then we'll come and take it, what you owe us. And the German government essentially, eventually, tell the workers in this area to go on strike. Just don't work. Just don't make things anymore. And then they won't be able to take what they're trying to take because they'll be stuck. And at first, I mean, it seems like a decent plan on the surface. But one of the problems is, in order to keep workers doing this, in order to keep workers at work, they start printing money in order to pay them. Because as you can imagine, if you tell people to go on strike and they're sitting there thinking, well, I can go on strike, but we're not making the things that I'm getting paid to make anymore. I'm just going to make sure that this is in line. I'm going to have to separate these out later, but we won't worry about that right now. As the workers are on strike, they're not making what they're being paid for. So eventually their families are going to go hungry, and in order to combat that, the German government, the Weimar Republic, start printing money to pay these workers. Now this is a real problem, because if you are printing money, oh, here we go, oh, that's what I've done wrong, look, I just needed 3. Oh, what an error, what a schoolboy error. Always plan ahead, so I'm going to have to drop all these later, shouldn't take too long. We'll work it out. I might have to chop off a little bit of space from the window. This is it, look, that's the problem right there. This extra little bit. Oh, schoolboy, what a noob, what a noob. Oh well. But yeah, if you start printing money, that doesn't actually mean that well, what it essentially means is the money you are producing or printing eventually loses its value. And eventually, It's not worth anything. And Germany enters a period called hyperinflation, where the money itself, the actual paper money that you might take to the shop to buy something with, it doesn't mean as much. So in order to say, let's say, a bottle of Coke cost you £2 this morning, if by the evening £2 is not worth what it was at the start of the day, then the bottle of Coke might cost £4 or £6. And Germany got to a stage where people in Germany were collecting their wages, and if they didn't spend it immediately, they weren't able to pay for anything. They weren't able to buy anything in the shops. So people are hungry, they're angry, and it causes all sorts of problems in Germany generally. Now, it's a pretty tricky concept, hyperinflation, and we don't want to kind of overcomplicate it. I'm just checking, there's actually another door right here, so I'm going to check a door in here. It's actually pretty complicated, and it comes down to the idea that money, in a weird way, doesn't... It's what you might call a social construct. It's kind of like a day of the week. It's important because people at the time and place have decided it's important, but that's about it. There's nothing... if everyone decides, for instance, tomorrow morning that pound coins are worthless and they're just kind of pieces of metal, then you're not going to be able to buy so much with a pound coin. It's quite a tricky concept, and it kind of undermines a lot of how the country runs, but generally that's how it is. Yeah, so let's got some doors in, got some door frames in. Look, here we go. So someone owns a $1 note from Mugabe, Zimbabwe, who had a similar hyperinflation. Yeah, absolutely. It's worth about half a matchstick. Yeah. Money is like squash. The more you add to your glass, the weaker the squash becomes. Ooh, that's a nice analogy. Yes, true. And the Weimar Republic, by printing money in the early 1920s, in 1923, to pay off workers so they're not making anything, destroy their own economy, they destroy the currency, and people are broke. So if you can imagine living in Germany at this stage, you've just had a period at the outset where you've lost the First World War, then the people who have taken over the government have signed a treaty that you hate, there's communists trying to take over, there's right-wingers, ex-soldiers trying to take over, there's fighting in the streets, and then there's an economic crisis where you can't afford anything because your government has really handled an economic problem poorly. It's no surprise that people are absolutely raggo in Germany. Now, I'm having a look. We're nearly done for what we was hoping to get done today. Now, I'm going to have to lift this a little bit, so eventually everything will come up a level. There should be, but then the problem I've got is I've got to fill in these gaps. But do you know what? That is actually about right. I'm just seeing. So we just want to make sure we get to a stage where we can get onto the Nazis a little bit more next time. So there is a little bit down here that I need to add in this little corner. So if you look at the blueprints, if you can see the ones that I've put in, you'll see that there is a little corner here cut out. Like it looks a bit like this. We want to try and make it as accurate as we can. I mean, it wouldn't be going into the window like this. Maybe I should move it back a bit. Yeah, let's do that. About here. So it's in this context, it's in this kind of environment in which people are angry, they're frustrated, they've had enough of the Weimar Republic, that the Nazis really come into the fore publicly, and they try to take power in Germany in the early 1920s. And we'll look at this a little bit more next time, because I'm going to start clearing a little bit more now, and if you've seen any of these streams before, you'll know I can't multitask, so you'll see that, I mean, that would be pointless if I tried to do that. But basically, the Nazis are going to copy what's happened in Italy with Mussolini, where he's taken power by force, and they're going to try and take over Germany entirely. So we'll have a look at that next time, because the consequences of that are quite significant in terms of what happens in Germany next, and in terms of a period in the 1920s where things actually slowly start to improve. So, in terms of those who maybe sit in GCSE exams that cover these things, so far we've looked at the situation in Germany at the end of the First World War, how the Weimar Republic was first introduced, how it was first received, and today we've considered a little bit more some of their early challenges, the Treaty of Versailles, the Spartacist uprising, the Kapp Putsch, and the hyperinflation crisis. Some of these are not, you could say, their fault in the sense of they'd kind of encouraged them or created them, but they don't really deal with any of them particularly well. Here we go, that looks about right. So, what we're going to do, I'm going to have a quick look in the comments for questions and all the rest now, and then I think we'll give this a knock on the head. So, Yeah, nothing else. So, amazing, right. We've got to 35 minutes there. We're aiming for our 40. That's about right. Like I said, if I start going any further, I'm going to start messing up because I can't concentrate. Because I need Mr. Tim to come and help me build stuff. But we're slowly making progress. We've nearly... It's so white. It just looks so bright. We're going to have to switch some of these. But we've got the first half of the house nearly finished. And then eventually we'll start to see that about here, up until where the grass ends, there's another building, which is the annex itself, where things are hidden away. Okay, what do you think? Oh, a question just before we go. So, what do you think the key cause of World War II was? Okay, good question. I think it's hard to look past, in terms of World War II, it's hard to look past German aggression in terms of trying to reverse different terms of the Treaty of Versailles. The Allied nations, Britain, often kind of are highlighted in this sense, give a lot of leeway in the sense of they seem to think that some of the terms of the Treaty of Versailles are actually unfair, and they allow Germany a lot of leeway, and Germany just kind of keep pushing the needle by invading other countries. I think it's hard to look past that as a key cause, but we'll definitely get there, because next time we'll look at the mid-1920s. We've got up to 1923, 1924 today. We'll look at the mid-1920s next time, and then we're going to start looking at the Nazis coming into power. Really they start getting more popularity in 1929 up to, till they come to power in 1933. So that's what we'll look at. Don't forget, if you haven't already, you've got to like the video. You've got to like this, because if I don't get likes, then I lose. I can't keep doing this, because what's the point, innit? What's the point? I mean, it's obviously for education that I'm doing this, of course, and to save time teaching things, of course, but also for likes. And then also, if you've not subscribed and all the rest, all the usual stuff, you have to do it. You have to do it. It's very, very important that you do it. Super important. But that's it for today. We'll leave it there. We've got most of the building constructed on the front bit. We'll add a little bit more in eventually. And then we'll start building the second half over here. Probably pick this up next week. I'll put a post up on YouTube and on Instagram to kind of highlight when we're looking at this next. And then we'll go from there. Although we've got a quick story. Do you know about the campaign? Yes. Now, Miles has just dropped a super interesting story about the train carriage that the armistice was signed in. So the armistice is not the peace treaty. The armistice was the document that ended the First World War, or at least ended the fighting of the First World War. So it was a ceasefire. We're not going to fight anymore. People are going to put down their guns until we agree a formal treaty. I actually mentioned the story that you've just touched on, that's been touched on in the comments about what this train carriage was used for in the last stream. So earlier I mentioned that the Treaty of Versailles was signed in a place in the same building, if not the same room, that the German nation was officially formed in. So the same treaty that kind of dismantled parts of Germany and hampered Germany was signed in the same room that the German nation was officially formed in. There is a similar story with the train carriage in which the armistice was signed in, but what I'm going to do, shameless self-promotion, you've got to watch the other live stream to find out what the story is, because I do mention it. I can't remember the exact timestamp, but in the previous live stream about building Anne Frank's secret annex, we've got I've mentioned that. Yeah. Oh, and it's worth saying, I forgot to say, I'll change the titles of these once I've kind of know what we're talking about in each one. But the title today has come from a comment from a previous video where someone suggested a clickbaity title. So if you've got any ideas for clickbaity titles, leave them in the comments or in the chat, and I'll have a look, because it's pointless giving specific titles of what we're going to talk about until I know what we're going to talk about, innit? What's the point of that? So, so if you've got any good ideas for super clickbaity titles, brilliant. Drop them in. We'll use one of them as I have today. And make sure, if you're interested in what's happened with the train carriage, that you watch the previous video in the series, and I'll add them all in. I'm pretty sure that's not how that door's supposed to work, so there'll be a gap. Right, we'll get it fixed. We'll get the rest fixed, and then we'll go from there. Right, amazing. Thanks for those who've joined in and have asked questions or left comments. Yep, have a good week. See you later.